Chapter 3, Part 2. Fortunately, her financial problems for the time were solved by the arrival in Paris of Prince Henri d'Aline. Through the theater, he had found out her Rue de Faux address and had immediately moved in with her. Far from being horrified over the arrival of his infant son, he was filled with happy emotion, for he was still deeply in love with Sarah. She was still deeply, passionately in love with him. A month or so passed blissfully, so much so that Deline made up his mind that the bliss must be permanently and legally continued. He went to Brussels and faced his family with the shattering announcement that he wanted to marry an unknown half-Jewish actress by whom he had an illegitimate child. One can imagine the impact of this thunderbolt. There were the expected horrified refusals, parental tears, and threats to disown and cut him off without a sow or sou. The young man pointed out that Madame Tallien, a turn-of-the-century courtesan, had been socially accepted when she became the Princess de Chimay, and that La Paiva, a contemporary grand horizontal, that attained respectability by marrying the Count of Donnersmarck. The fact that Madame Tallien had gone to bed with every important man in the Directoire, and that La Paiva was not only notorious for her erotic activities, but was suspected of being a spy for the Germans, hardly strengthened his argument. He protested that anyway, his beloved was not a courtesan and never had been, all of which left his parents unmoved. He hurried back to Paris, still determined to marry Sarah, no matter what the consequences. After a few days, he was called away on business affairs, and during his absence there arrived Henri's distinguished uncle, General Deline, who had dispatched to break up his nephew's shocking liaison and save the honor of the family. The impressive old gentleman strode into Sarah's sitting room, prepared to confront a bedizened hussy, and found instead an exquisite young mother, simply gowned, serenely playing with her baby. Anyone can improvise the ensuing scene, or, failing a gift for improvisation, let him read the libretto for the second act of Traviata. The outcome was that, although completely captivated by Sarah's candor and charm, he was adamant in regard to the family stand, and he took his leave with Sarah's heartbroken promise to give up her lover for the sake of his future. Henri returned to Paris, and the renunciation scene took place. It might perhaps be uncharitable to point out that when Madame Sarah related these events to Louis Verneuil, and subsequently to her granddaughter, she had already performed La Dame aux Camélias well over 1,000 times. Sarah reminded the prince that marriage with her would mean loss for him of position and fortune. He protested with a noble variation of all for love and the world well lost. All for love and the world well lost. She then found courage to say that, much as she adored him, she could never be happy with domesticity in a garret. Moreover, her aim in life was to be a great and successful theatrical star. And she added that she already had an offer from the Odeon. The young man listened with incredulity, which changed into fury. He didn't, as in the play, fling a pack of cards in her face, but he flung a stream of bitter invective. He called her a worthless cabotine, who cared for nothing but sensational notoriety, a vulgar harlot, and further unfortunate epithets. At the finish of his tirade, he stormed from the room, slamming the door behind him, and Sarah fell senseless onto the floor. For several days she lay in a bona fide coma, cared for by Madame Gerard, who despaired of her life. But then, Madame Gerard was the apprehensive type. There were others of the Bernhardt-Deline affair, too numerous and some of them too preposterous to repeat. To give a brief resume of Basil wounds, he states that the prince remained Sarah's lover until he found out she was pregnant, at which awkward disclosure he immediately jilted her. After little Maurice's birth, she said to have sought him out in Paris his Paris apartment, babe in arms, to beg for assistance. Sent in a note via the footman and waited miserably in the outer lobby. The prince is credited with having scribbled a reply on the back of Sarah's card reading, "I know a woman named Bernhardt, but I do not know her son." Sarah persisted in her entreaties to see her demon lover, who finally appeared and coldly disclaimed any responsibilities of parenthood. Sarah swore by all that she had held sacred that he was indeed the father, to which he retorted with the remark Augustine Brohan had already made famous about sitting down on a bundle of thorns and being unable to know which one has pierced you. Wound's account is obviously lifted from Marie Colombier's libellous Memoirs of Sarah Barnum, a vindictive and scurrilous book, which for the most part is a collection of distasteful lies, and of which more will be told. It would be senseless to attempt to prove which account is the true one. The great show woman told hers directly to Louis Verneuil and to her granddaughter. At least she told them what she wanted told in turn to posterity. I prefer, in respect for her wishes, to stick by the Lady of the Camellias version. There was no question that Sarah Bernhardt's adventure with the father of her son was the great love affair of her life, which remained sacred and nostalgically painful in her memory as her abiding wound. If she romanticized it over the years, who can blame her? What woman doesn't romanticize her better amorous recollections? She never discussed Maurice's parentage with anyone, although she never tried to pretend that his birth was legitimate. To people tactless enough to express curiosity on the subject, she had been known to remark in her usual reckless fashion, "I could never make up my mind whether his father was Gambetta, Victor Hugo, or General Bollinger." As late as 1917, she told one starry-eyed young actress in her company, whom she swore to utmost secrecy, that the true father of her son was not the Prince Deline, but the Duke of Clarence. The fact that the Duke of Clarence, like his supposed son, was also born in 1864 adds color to this statement. When Bernhardt told Lean that she had received an offer from the Odeon, it was partly true. She had gone after it following her interview with the general and her heart-rending decision to break with his nephew. In desperate need to find an immediate job and busy herself in work, she had gone to the Ministry of Fine Arts and her old friend Camille Doucet, begging him to bring pressure at the Odeon as he had at the Française. This, she knew, would be a big step forward in her career. The Odeon on the left bank near the Luxembourg was known as the Second Comédie Française. It too was a national theater, but far less tradition-bound and more enterprising than the grand old establishment across the Seine. It too was a repertory house presenting the classics, but in more experimental style, and new plays were constantly being tried out. The ticket price was cheaper and the clientele less fashionable, but composed of knowledgeable theater lovers. To have a job at the Odeon was regarded as an enviable distinction. When young Bernhardt made her urgent request, Doucet had looked grave. It would not be easy, he said. The entire theatrical world, who knew nothing about her talent, knew at least about her forced exit from the Comédie, about her skipping her obligations at the Gymnase. The only name she had made for herself was that of an irresponsible flibbertigibbet, with a temper so uncontrollable as to be at times frenetic. He scolded her like a grieved but tender father. Sarah shed a torrent of repentant tears and promised that once in the Odeon, she'd be the model of good behavior, and Doucet, with considerable misgivings, gave her a letter to Felix Duquesnel, who, with his partner Charles Marie de Chilly, Chilly, ran this excellent theater. Duquesnoy was a gracious gentleman and a spirited director who handled his actors with tact and warm good humor. Sarah found him completely delightful, and he must have found her so, for he wrote of her of their first meeting. I beheld before me the most ideally charming creature one can dream of. Sarah at 22 baffles all description. She was not pretty, but she was better than pretty. It was mid-June. She wore a china silk blouse of a delicate shade with beaded embroidery, her arms and shoulders thinly veiled, a feather fan at her belt, and on her head a fine straw skimmer, trimmed with tiny bells that tinkled at the slightest movement. He wanted to give her a contract on the spot, but said that the ultimate decision would have to be up to his senior partner, and to whose office he conducted her. The young woman's heart sank when she recognized Chili, who all too clearly recognized her. He had been present when she had tried out for the part of ambigu theater and under unfortunate conditions. The part was that of a shepherdess in something called La Bergère d'Ivry, written by Lambert Thibodeau, a friend of hers who had recommended her to Faille, Faille, the doddering old director of the Ambigu. Faille, or Faille, called her to give a reading up a bare stage lit only by a smoking kerosene lantern which served as a work light. At the finish, Faille shook his head and said, "My child, you have no qualifications for the theatre." Chile, who had an interest in the show, had been watching from the darkened house. His single comment was, "Whoever saw a shepherdess so thin?" Chile was as loutish and disagreeable as Decanel was courteous and affable. He listened to Decanel's recommendations, glanced through Doucette's letter, then insolently, looking the girl up and down, snorted, "If I were alone in this, I wouldn't give you a contract. If I were alone in this, I wouldn't give you a contract." "If you were alone in this," she retorted, "I wouldn't sign it." She did sign for the sum of 150 francs a month. Her opening role was that of Sylvia in Marivaux's Jeu de l'amour et du hasard, and she was not good. The playing of 18th century comedy offers a problem of trifling but precise stylization, which was never her forte. That was to be based on an inner power of fundamental sincerity, which was out of place in period frivolity. Moreover, in Fragonard costume, she looked ridiculous. Dumas, who still took a fatherly interest in young Bernhardt and who was attending the performance, commented, "She was the head of a virgin and the body of a broomstick." She has the head of a virgin and the body of a broomstick. Chile wanted to cancel her engagement immediately, but Decanel still had belief in her. So much so that he volunteered to pay her salary out of his own pocket if Chile would give her a further chance. Her next appearance was as Armande in Moliere's Femmes Savantes. Again, stylized comedy, and again, she was not good, but she was better. And Chile was a bit less contemptuous, although he still made cutting comments about her skinniness, referring to her as a needle automated by 4 pins. Sarah more than once was tempted to give him a sock in the pudgy face, but she remembered her promise to Doucette and controlled herself. In King Lear, Sarah proved an exquisite and touching Cordelia, and her prospects brightened. Her first personal hit was as the young boy Zachary in Racine's Athalie, Athalie. This was to be a special production using Mendelssohn themes in the background, and as a startling innovation, the lines of the Greek chorus, which is usually omitted, being semi-chanted by a group of music students from the Conservatoire. It was an interesting idea, which didn't exactly work out. The students couldn't seem to come in on the proper cue, and when they did, they sounded rather like a class of medieval graduates reciting the Hippocratic Oath. The Comédie Française actor Bevalet, who had been brought over as director, gave up trying to get the desired effect, dismissed the students, and entrusted all the words of the chorus to Sarah. Standing apart at one side of the stage, this wisp of a girl in her young boy's tunic spoke the words in a voice of pure music, and the result was magical. The audience picked her out for a special applause, and the next day the press was warm with praise. The Sour Sarce, writing that young Mademoiselle Bernhardt charmed her audience like a little Orpheus. Her big break came with the 1868 revival of Kean, the elder Dumas's drama concerning the colorful and periodically mad British tragedian. Sarah was cast in the leading feminine role of Anna Danby. The opening night before the play began, a demonstration was staged in the audience, which all but grew into an uncontrollable riot. This was a period when Victor Hugo, still in exile on the island of Guernsey, had become, in the eyes of the radicals and the liberals, a hero and the torchbearer of democracy. The fact that his plays were banned by the imperial government merely fanned the fervor of his supporters. That night, a delegation of students and other ardent Hugolians had bought out a large portion of the house for the purpose of putting on a noisy demonstration to protest the fact that Odeon, a state theater, should be giving them Dumas instead of a work of the master. To add to their indignation, Dumas himself appeared in a box accompanied by his current mistress, a highly unpopular creature named Ada Montrine. There were boos and catcalls and cries of, "Down with Dumas! Give us Hugo!" The three hammer blows signaling the moment for the rising curtain failed to quiet the uproar. Sarah, listening in the wings, was shaking with apprehension. The play started, and the speeches of the beginners were inaudible above the din. Sarah's cue came to go on, and she was sure she could never brave it, but somehow she did. Ashen under her makeup and fragile as a reed in Anna Danby's 1810 costume, her appearance made no impression on the demonstrators out front, who continued to whistle, stamp, and demand their author. Then all at once, terror gave way to her extraordinary zest for meeting a challenge. The young actress stepped artlessly down to the footlights and held out her hands in a gesture of disarming appeal. Gradually, the audience grew quiet, and in a clear, candid tone, she said, "Friends, you wish to defend the cause of justice. Are you doing it by making Monsieur Dumas responsible for the banishment of Monsieur Hugo?" It did the trick. The audience broke into a good-natured laughter and applause. The rioting stopped, and the play proceeded without further interruption, except for occasional bursts of spontaneous appreciation for the remarkable performance Sarah found herself giving. She played like a dream, fluid, exquisitely moving, and with a simplicity for which those days was startlingly natural. At the finish, Decca now sent her out to take a solo curtain call, and she heard for the first time the intoxicating thunder of a personal ovation. Decanel was rapturous. Even his surly partner was impressed. "You are good," he exclaimed, "wonderfully good." And he went so far as to address her by the intimate second-person singular. Sarah, also playing the two, responded sweetly, "You find I've grown plumper, monsieur." The management informed her that her salary would be increased to 250 francs a month, and Chili told Decanel he need no longer pay anything out of his own pocket. He furthermore could get back his previous payments from the theater treasury. Old Dumas came puffing backstage to kiss Sarah's hand over and over and declare he would write a new play especially for her. But he was to die in 2 years before doing so. For the first of what would be thousands of subsequent times, a crowd of admirers gathered to cheer and toss flowers as Sarah Bernhardt made her exit through the stage door. "Back in my room that night," she wrote, "I felt so rich, I was afraid of robbers." And that's where we will pause.